bing, bing, bing. You go,
Good evening and welcome. I'm Hailey Coxon and this is Revved Up and Relive live on the Spirit of Motorsport TV. So here we are for a live interactive show once again, and what hell of a show we've got lined up for you this evening. We've got the great Roy Moore and Barry Wood joining us once again. Remember, you can contribute to the show by sending us your questions, get involved in the chat. So please do share it with your friends as well. Like it, share the page. Remember, if you're not watching it on YouTube, make sure you go over there and subscribe, because you're going to help us grow. And then by growing, we can continue to provide you with the content that you want and you absolutely deserve. So get involved in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Just tag your friends, get them to join us in the studio as well, and get us to join us in tonight's show. So good evening to Roger Barnes. And good evening to John O'Sullivan. John Korshirsky, fan of the show. Howdy from America. Welcome, everybody. And John O'Sullivan is tagging his friends. Thank you so much, Carlos. It started yet as Welcome, Carlos. Thanks for joining us again. So, guys, we have quite a few guests this evening. Not only the great Roy and Barry that we all know and love, we've also got two Irish road racing legends. Now, before we introduce them, we're going to introduce our Manx legends, and that is the great Roy Moore and Barry Wood into the show to discuss why we have this particular theme to this evening's show. Welcome, Roy and Barry.
Evening, Campers, all round. The Manx edition of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of PT here. And absolutely, what a delight it is. I don't know how it all came about. I think we were discussing two things, and one is still on the agenda. One was a kind of the Irish involvement. And certainly I've got kind of a longer memory than the boys for that. But that's when Barry comes in, because not only has he raced in Ireland, but he's met in various pubs in Ireland some of the real characters. But you've got TT winners in Brian Reid and Con Law. And just before we start, don't panic, lads. All it is just as if we were up at the Cat with No Tail with a pint pot in our hand, having a bit of a yarn and a natter. And I'm sure you'll be a little bit nervous, but certainly everybody would be nervous if they were on that start line up at Glencrutchery Road. But this is just a little chat between ourselves. And as I say, Barry has got the kind of main part of it tonight, with all his memories of various things. You can tell by the stories he's been putting on about the visitors he's had at Williston, staying with him, and just absolutely terrific. And where else could you get stories like that? My kind of involvement is in the early days when we were starting to get active round 55, 54, was hearing about the great Stanley Woods, who was an Irishman. Barry had that lovely story on our last output about getting the sweets to the Boy Scouts. And Stanley Woods was a legend, multi-times TT winner, and certainly everybody knew that he was from Ireland. But in my time, it was when Reg Armstrong, you had to be explained or told why he had a big shamrock on the front of his helmet, and certainly Ireland was then described as being somewhere where you went out and got to it by going from Peel. So that was a kind of an output on that. And then when you read the books, you saw that Cromie McCandless was an Irishman and a TT winner as well. But it was always the thing that you had to ask people in those early days about it. And certainly that was the case. But with Barry, he's lived it. He's been away. I have to admit, I'll hold my hands up. I've only ever been away to Ireland once to watch a meeting. I think it was 79. And we went to the Ulster Grand Prix on a chartered flight from the airport at Ronaldsway, run by the Southern 100 Club, and landed somewhere in a field near the circuit. and then got to it on there, 79. Some memorable moments from that as well. We've got a few questions, or we have got a few questions lined up for the boys, but I've done my part in the early productions. It's from Ramsey Hairpin. We hand you back to Barry Wood at the grandstand.
I think, as Roy says, originally this was planned to be a programme chatting about Irish races generally over the years. And he said, well, who could we get to join us? Hailey said, you know of anybody? And I can remember a couple of years ago up at the local pub in TT Week where Con Law came up for a drink with me and another friend, Jack Curry. And at the end of the night, Con said, try and organise a chat show during the winter time. I would be delighted to be involved in that. So I thought, well, I'll maybe do that sometime. Well, of course, everything's gone down the pan with this COVID thing. So when this was mentioned about who can we get to join us, I said, well, maybe Con Law might like to, because Con Law can talk. If you think we can talk, Con Law can talk a bit more than us, and he knows what he's talking about. And then we suggested Brian Reid as well. Great. Well, they're both road race legends, you know. So it's a great coup to have these two boys joining us tonight. I'm really proud to be involved in this. Going back my own history with Irish road racing in general, my favourite rider all of my life has been Reid McCulloch, who is not a TT or Manx Grand Prix rider, but he has raced the Southern 100 many, many times and won the Southern 100 many times. He won the Ulster in 71, and I became a fan at the Southern 100, and I followed him forever. So, of course, into the mid-70s, you had people like Joey coming up, you had Conor and Brian Reid, and you had a myriad of other, mainly two-stroke Irish road races. And then one by one, they came and done either the Manx or the TT or both. And this is really where Con and Brian came into our awareness, if you like. And they both went to the top of the tree. There's not much that they haven't achieved between them. And hopefully, you'll all join in and ask them any questions that you have, and I'm sure they'd be delighted to respond to that. So great to be here.
So we got quite a few comments already, boys. So let's just share some of the viewers' comments. We've got Andre Durkop saying good evening. Gabazabi saying evening, guys. Good to be back. Roger Barnes is asking, Roy, would you like a gin? We've got Gail Core says, looking forward to this, as well as Bert and Ernie. We also have some Irish legends to add to the mix. Thanks, guys. Great Hollis says, hey up. Ian English says, hi all. And Chris Miller says, evening all, from one of Team Weirdo. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant. So remember, guys, please keep sharing your comments and your questions. I'm going to dip in and out of the show this evening to share your questions with the boys as I allow them to just continue their little catch up and their own stories and memories and of the island and beyond. Yeah, we have Ian Huntley commenting here. Good evening, Ian. Thanks for joining us. He also says, hi to Con and Brian, and don't forget Kevin Ago Murphy. Very good. All right. So without further ado, so we invite them into studio, the great Con Law. So as the boys have already mentioned some of his achievements, but his TT career was between 1980 and 85, during which time he collected 2 winners' replicas with back-to-back victories in the junior TTs and in 1983 to add to his previous lightweight Manx Grand Prix win in 1979. He's now retired, but well known as a travelling marshal at most of his Ulster road races. So the great Con Law, welcome to the TSOM studio.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Con.
Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Absolutely brilliant. And Mr. Brian Reid, he's going to be joining also. So Brian has an amazing history on the island and obviously in road racing. In 1982, Brian created history by becoming the first to win 3 Irish road race championships in 1 year. Road racing successes galore continued after that, including 5 TT wins, right up until Brian retired from racing in 1994 following his serious incident at Temple 100. But he's here with us this evening. Mr. Brian Reid, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here and be able to talk about some TT racing. It's going to be brilliant crack.
Brilliant
Boys,
crack.
it's an honour, absolute honour.
I'm sure Roy and Barry will have plenty of questions to keep calling me talking anyway.
Give it a go.
Well, it's just so nice to have you both on, and I suppose when we kind of do these things, we're not Chris Kinley and Tim Glover, we're Roy and Barry, so it might be slightly different than the normal how do you feel and what you're riding and this, that and the other. It's just a general resume, really. And as we have said, it's just as though we're sat down the table up at the Cat with a pint and just talking and chewing the fat about different things. I've mentioned in my kind of introduction the people that I remember. Artie Bell was another kind of Irishman who did quite well, Norton Works rider. But when you first started off, who were you looking up to at the time? Con, who were the men that you were saying, if I ever do this sport, I'll get involved like him?
The way it worked for me, my cousin, I went to the first race with my parents, and that was more or less for a day out, as it was a done thing to go to the Northwest. And Richard Creth won that race. That's a long, long time ago. He won it, and he went on to win the Ulster Grand Prix as well, twice. But he was a hero. We had a local man who lived near me, Billy McCosh, who I became very friendly with in later years. Ian McGregor, Brian's uncle, was a front runner at the time. And you had Len Ireland, Raymond McCulloch was making his name as well. As a young lad at that time, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe the confidence, the skill and the ability of these men to control their bikes. These are on road circuits. And I would hitch a lift with these friends as often as I could. When it didn't happen, I remember age 14 thumbing a lift the 40-odd 50 miles to Cardor. Didn't know where Cardor was. Couldn't miss it. Knew I had all day there to find someone to get me back home again. But it worked. Did the same to McGabry, an airfield circuit we had. But over those years, from I started going to spectate, there's a broad range of people there. Tom Hearn coming, competing in the national events, going to the TT. We listened to it on the radio then, and never imagining that you would get to spectate or compete in the island. Big thing for us. But those are the people that I followed at that time. Jordan Locke, Mervyn Robertson, they came along later, became friends. It was a great time to be involved. I think we were very lucky, myself and Brian, to enjoy that time. It was a great time for Irish racing and for international road racing here at home. Just a good time to be involved.
Cool.
There you go. There's the photos coming up fantastic. Now. Yeah, Barry will be showing all the ins and outs of these.
Well, that's before.
That's before the wee relief road there was tarmac.
Oh, the road con, that's right. Yeah, so you had to slow up a bit sharper to get into that place.
You had to slow up, turn round, stop, helmet off. My brother, he's standing waiting. Big thing for him, big thing for me. And once I get the helmet off, I get a mighty bear hug anyway. Lifted me clean in my feet, to be honest. A big thing for us. Then you go up into the winner's enclosure. There's an hour for that anyone can protest if they wish, so you can't relax for that hour. But in the meantime, the podium and all takes place, and absolutely brilliant for us. Absolutely brilliant. Great memories, you know.
Oh yeah. What about you, Brian? Did you go to watch the races as a young boy as well?
Well, Con mentioned Ian McGregor, my uncle, and he was my hero, and always, so I went to watch him from I was about 6 years old, and hardly ever missed a race from those days. Followed him all around Ireland racing. When I got a bit older, then I used to go to the races with him, and probably another man who Con mentioned, Raymond McCulloch. So I saw it all from an early age, and then it's all I ever wanted to do was to race motorbikes. Once I saw that, and saved up my money and bought a bike, and started. And first of all, you had to do 6 short circuits, I think it was, before you could get onto the roads. So I couldn't wait to get onto the roads, and again I had watched, the likes of Halewood and Ivy and all those guys at the Ulster Grand Prix, and looked at all the photographs of them riding at the Isle of Man, and that was a dream for me to come to race in the Isle of Man. It's all I ever wanted to do. So I remember looked at all the photographs, but the first time I arrived in the Isle of Man, I couldn't believe, Balaf, which I had seen in photographs before, it looked completely different. And you had 37 3/4 miles of that just photographs that you'd seen, it looked completely different when you're actually driving around or riding around in a bike. So I first came to the Manx in 1978 as a newcomer, and that was the first ever newcomers race, 1978. There was atrocious conditions of rain and the fog, and couldn't believe, the start of that race. When you look at the conditions now that they won't ride in, the rain was actually bouncing off the road. So
That's right.
That was horrendous conditions. And Phil Miller, he won that newcomers 250 race.
Hey, Brian, you started alongside Phil Miller.
I did indeed, yes. And throughout practice, either he was fastest or I was fastest. And, I was looking at this name, Phil Miller, and I hadn't a clue who he was. And I'd seen his name in the results in the UK. But and the first time I actually met was sitting on the line together. We sort of looked at each other and sat off together. And he won it. My bike had a cold seizure eventually and threw me off at May Hill.
Yes,
so there it is. Yeah, that's the start. Yeah, that's Phil and me starting together. And as I say, the Reid.
What the two of you went on to achieve at the TT after that start like that at the Manx Grand Prix.
Well, and the man in the photograph there, I arrived in Isle of Man, I had no van or anything, just a toolbox to stand on the bike. Was dropped off at Randall Cowell, who sponsored Con and his garage, and Con and me worked at the bikes. And I rode my bike every night up to the paddock and parked it against the wall. And then every night retired after my second lap, probably at Balaf Bridge. and then rode the bike up to Randall's house, which is only about half a mile up the road. So that was my introduction to the TT. And there was a guy standing there in that photograph who's actually staying in the Seacliff Hotel, who put me up for the fortnight. And he eventually came along and gave me a bit of a hand. And that's Hector and me waiting for, it looks like practice, because he has a spare helmet there. So that's 1980. That's 1983, 83, I think that. Or no, 93.
Did you always have a red and white helmet, Brian? Was there a reason for that, for both colours?
Sorry?
Did you always have a red and white helmet? Crash helmet?
Yeah, I sort of came up with the design of the helmet myself. I didn't, at the beginning, I used a helmet belonging to Ian McGregor, which was my uncle, but I sort of wanted to have my own identity and came up with that design. And eventually RI then they sponsored me and supplied the helmets, and they came painted from Japan. And at the beginning I just had the one that I had designed and sent RI the photograph, and then they arrived painted, which was fantastic.
Just
Yeah,
as
that's,
a thing, Con, you were saying before about your early days and stuff like that, and yeah, maybe I've kind of gone through it, but I got the impression when you were talking about that it was one like kind of big family, the road racing scene, and anybody who's watched the road races and all the other DVDs that are about from those early days, I don't think we're assuming it. I think that it was known that if you were starting out, you were helped. Certainly not the case in this day and age now, but there would be a few fellas there that would be giving you bits of advice and not on the riding side as well, but on the marine machine preparation.
Very, very much. Pardon me. Very much so. There was like a very, very great camaraderie at that time. The team, more or less, there were spectators, helpers, mechanics. The race took part on Saturday, but people kept in touch, and there was great fun throughout the week. Devilment, just fun. It's all part of it. Going to the race, coming home. Great crack at that time. The time the road racers was made, to be honest, I was injured and was off that half of that season, and was behind the scenes when most of it was being filmed. But it was a great old time. Now, at that time, I said earlier that me and Brian happened at a great time for Irish racing. If you think about it, when I started to watch, and when Brian started to watch Ian McGregor and company racing, they were on Max Nortons and G50s and 4-strokes, or Mackies. Then came along the first of the Yamahas, TD1s, TD2s, and then the TZs, which was really Brian in my time. And the TZA, TZB, C, up through the years. There were more machines available and they were more affordable. So there were riders who could afford new bikes, Billy Guthrie, Raymond McCulloch, probably Ian, buying new bikes. Next year they would buy more new bikes, and those second-hand bikes moved down the line. So it thickened up the grid, and it grew up to be that period, that TZ years, later to become the Rotax years. There was probably 3 heats at home here for a circuit race, short circuit race at Kirkstone, possibly 30 plus riders in each heat. So you had to be about yourself just to qualify, to make sure you got into the final. The final then was tight in itself, but it was a great time. There was a great number of riders, and somehow everybody knew everybody else at that time. If there was a problem with the bike, you were always sure to get help or assistance somewhere. One guy who did help me in riding the bike, that photograph there, now that was after the prize giving, after the beer tent in '83. After the podium, beer tent, and you do a lot of racing and meeting people and celebrating. Then go home, cleaned, washed, down to the presentation. But on the way out of the tent, I'd come upon Norman Brown. I was very, very friendly with Norman and his family. Norman Brown and his team were posing for a photograph. They brought me in, the mouse, Stanley Morrow's there. Great crack at that time. Norman's fellas there, Sam the mechanic, Hector. That was just a good photo, good time. So it was just explains what I'm saying. One lad, as to say, who did help me a lot in riding the bike and machine preparation, advice on how to set it, was Joe Lindsay. Joe had a bad accident, a fatal accident at 78 at the Skerries. Me and him were together in the paddock, together on the road, and I actually helped him on the roadside. But he helped me and advised me, coaxed me to go to the TT, the Manx Grand Prix. Joe had just won the Manx, I believe it was maybe 350 race in 75. It'll suit you. But I took a lot of great advice from Joe. Joe's nickname was Gentleman Joe. He was a wee dogger, not too big in size, friendly with everybody. A great old time.
Well, the people we got to know from Northern Ireland was sitting on the head of the bed in 1977 for Manx Grand Prix practice. And one of the lads pointed in the programme and he said, that would be me. Donald Hughes. He was meant to be it, and then Matthew Matisse, and it blew itself to bits. And we got to know each other, and we got to know all the other boys. And then the following year, he came and did the 700 and the Manx. And the year after that, 79, his mechanic did the Southern and the Manx. And for now, we just met loads and loads and loads of people. So I used to want to know the results from Donald about the Irish road races. Races used would have been. I want to know how Raymond had gone on. And we used to have to go down the telephone box on a Sunday night with a load of 10-pence pieces. You put a tuppence in first. And Donald would say hello, and I'd say, right, tell me as quick as you can. And he would tell me all the results. We've done this, we've done that, blah, blah, blah. Then your last 10 pence would run out. But I mean, I met so many people through them boys. And then, of course, in later years, I was going myself with the great Danny Shimon, who I'm sure you knew well too. And
I knew done it.
To this day, I have hundreds and hundreds of friends around the Irish road race scene. Missed them all this year, unfortunately. But that's where it all started for us, through being a Revved McCulloch fan, I'd say. Brian, you were saying before, you done the Southern 100 the year before you done the Newcomers Manx. Did you do the Southern that year?
I did decide. I won the Newcomers Award, 78. The Brian Duffy Trophy it was. For the best newcomer in the 250 class. So, yeah, I went over and did that, and then that allowed me to do a few laps on a road bike around the TT circuit to try and familiarise myself with that. Did hundreds and hundreds of laps around it to try and learn it, and but as soon as I sat off down Bray Hill, the first lap, I was totally lost again because the speed was so different. It just everywhere just looked completely different. So I did struggle to learn it, I have to say. And then the first year that I went, the weather was really terrible, so I didn't get too many laps, and the laps that we did get were poor.
Mm-hmm. But you don't Newcomers Manx. Con won the last Newcomers Award before the Newcomers race started in 1978, in fact. So I remember in 78, there was a lot more Irish boys came, a lot more roadsmen came over the Southern then, because of the Newcomers race. And I can remember being down at meeting Belfast boat on the Friday night before practice. And
all right, so you think it attracted a lot more Irish guys in because they had a separate race?
Right. There was a load of names I knew from the Irish road races who I thought I would never get to see race.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you had and you had Jackie Hughes, Richard Britton.
Yeah,
you know.
That's right. Jackie Hughes did it. Yeah.
There was a whole load of road race men came, and then I think there was more and more came from that. But it was a magical time for me. You Tom was saying earlier about it was a magical time in the 70s at the road races, and I would agree completely with that because a lot of it rubbed off onto us as well.
Yeah, I think we had the best years of it, as Con said. You know, when you went to a road race like the Tandragee, you were racing against TT winners, and if you won a race at any of the road races here, you were beating actual TT winners, and I think that's all changed now. If you look at the grids, you know, you'd be racing against people who are trying to win the Manx Grand Prix, which is completely different now. So
one of the fellas who would have been kind of you would be looking up to at that time in the 60s, he was riding then, Tommy Robb.
Hi.
Yeah,
Tommy Robb.
Tommy.
Yeah, he would
Tommy.
Wouldn't he?
Tommy was a great character, lovely character, and he's still around, but fairly elderly now. My mother, when we went to races to watch Ian racing, she was a big fan of Tommy Robb. So she always loved to get talking to Tommy.
They have this attraction about them, TT riders, don't they?
They do. Boys, your viewers have been loving it. You've got so many comments and questions. I'm just going to get through just a few of them, if that's okay. You've got Mark Lawson. This is for you, Brian. Hey, Brian, I'm TT crazy, and I was chatting to your cousin John the other week, as I'm an ex-professional jockey and have been doing lots of track days. Was chatting to John about the day when he won the English Derby aboard Dr. Devious, and that Brian had won a TT, and they were more interested in John winning the Derby. This is quite good.
Yeah.
Miles Caller says, good evening to everyone. Can I ask Con and Brian how they think Ray McCulloch would have got on it if he had raced at the TT? So if I can get you, Brian, to answer that first of all, if that's okay.
Yeah.
There is a bit of information that Ray McCulloch did enter for 66 on an Air Mackie and a Greaves, I think, from what I can gather.
That's right.
With it being the Seaman Strike over here and the Grand Prix and the TT being in the like 4 weeks of heaven, really. Well, certainly he didn't compete. He couldn't get off work, which again was, it's hard to imagine, even in the kind of short time we've been talking, how the camaraderie of all the early days and all that. And if you'd have said to somebody now, like about affording anything or doing that, if you couldn't get off work, that was the end of the conversation. Can I have my holidays to go for 2 weeks to the Isle of Man? No, you can't. So he had entered, but obviously didn't make it in 66.
Yeah, well, I think the TT would have been made for Raymond. He was absolute genius on the road circuits here, and can't see why he wouldn't have succeeded, around the TT course. I think it would have suited him down to the ground, and he always went every year to spectate. And when I was racing, he was always there on hand to help out in any mechanical issues or anything that we had. And yeah, absolute gentleman. And I think he would have won TT races if he had took the time and took the time off work and actually went to do it. And to answer the one about John Reid, my cousin, he won the Derby that year. I think it was 1992, and I had a double the TT that year. So all the national newspapers were coming to interview me, and there was photographs of me with a horse in the local field up at the Laugh there, holding this white horse, and that was the headlines. John winning the Derby, and me winning the double in the TT. John, he lives now in England, but he takes a great interest in my son, who's racing at BSB level now, and he watches all the results and watches the live timing, and he's really interested in. John actually coaches youngsters now how to ride, and has one of these machines where you sit on it, and it's like riding an actual horse, and he takes all the measurements of how they sit on the horse. So when he was over here, he had Simon sitting on the back, and he was measuring all the angles where he had his knees and all. So he was really getting into the techniques of it all. So
brilliant. So Con, we've got Brian Spooner saying, Con Law took me on a newcomer's lap at 10 degree. He was bloody fast 1-on-1. Much respect to him, and I qualified 6 fastest as a newcomer. So thank you.
That's very good.
And we've got a Facebook user, which I believe has come from Roy and Barry's page. Hi, Con. Was some shock to the system following you around the Northwest as a newcomer. A privilege, though. Brian, was great to get a wee run out on your old 500, the Mermaid at Scarborough Gold Cup this year. Lucky him. Yeah. John Kashirski says, Brian, I would love to know your favorite section of the TT, and also for Con as well.
For me, I tried not to have favorites, because if you were a favorite in one part, then you didn't like another part. So I try to just treat it all as one and enjoyed every part of it. But the story that stands out for me a bit is Ray Cullen. Just when you come out of Kirkmichael there, I never could get that section right, and I broke down there one night on my 500 RG and stood and watched, and there's loads of different lines through there, but Phil Reid, he came through in his RG, and it just looked perfect, and I just couldn't wait to get back, to get onto another bike to go and try it. And it went from being one of the places I was having trouble with to one of my favourites, and just loved going through Rencoln. It was one of my favourite spots, that one.
Mm. Fantastic. And Con, yourself, do you have a favourite section?
Funny as it happens, Rencoln for me was again a big favourite. Now, Rencoln's a section. You have to approach it. It's important that the 30 signs there. You've got a wee rise in the road. Don't let the bike wheelie too much. Make sure you cross the white line heading towards the wee bungalow. The further you get out to the left, if you have confidence to let your bike run it out smooth, then there's a wee bush on the right, a road sign where the wall just goes out of sight. That's what you're aiming for. If you've got those two right, the whole thing takes care of itself. But you have to get it right. Now, I loved it. And as it happened, was a funny story there, because back in the day, me and Brian in our Manx Grand Prix days worked out of the garage at Randall Kyle's house. I bought a bike from Ian McGregor, as I thought, Brian's uncle, but the bike actually belonged to an Isle of Man sponsor, Randall Kyle. So the final deal was done with Randall over the phone, right? Randall met us and assisted us, provided his garage when we went to do the Manx. He would help me as well on the course. But the way he worked the course, immediately the roads opened. Ginger, the mechanic, would take the bike down to the garage and start the preparations. I would get in the car and we would do a lap, and he would listen. But he's listening to see, as a newcomer, any place you're having trouble, and that's where we would stop that night, walk up, walk down. And for Rencoln, I would go and spectate at the TT during my Manx Grand Prix years, but I signed on as a road marshal for that section. And walking up, walking down on the road as a marshal, you can see you've got more freedom than a spectator would have. But you can see the full field through there. The quick men, the slow men, everybody. And everybody learns you something. What to look for, what to avoid. But I love that section. As it happens, the TT circuit, when I went to it first, I just liked it. It suited me. It suited me, as Joe Lindsay told me. It just suited me. And there was no section I didn't like. I loved the mountain section. I loved the top of Bigarro. I think competitors I think they're the same all over. It's just the privilege of riding it, the enjoyment from riding it. The 13th, that's another section. Don't take the first and fall onto the second one. Oh, I love it.
Fantastic. And one quick question for you, Brian. Great crack again from Simon Heath. That was his comment. He said, would Brian like to see his son racing at the TT or even in road racing?
That's a difficult question. I find it hard to watch Simon racing on short circuits and doing BSB. I'm a nervous wreck, and I think it's worse if you've done the racing yourself, because you know the things that can go wrong, the things that happen. So when he leaves to go into the circuit until he finishes, it's nerve-wracking for me. And I've said it before, I don't know if I could watch him heading off down Bray Hill. I would, and to wait that length of time to see him come back around again, it'll be a worrying time. But what can you do? When he said he wanted to start racing, I didn't encourage him at all, because I know how difficult it is and how much work you have to put into it. But he was determined. That's what he wanted to do. So he said he didn't want to regret it in later years, not having tried it. So, and he's been very successful, I have to say. So when he said that, what could I do? Only give him the best help I could give him, like Ian Gregor did for me, and try to help him as much as you can. And Ian's still a great fan of Simon's now and gives him a lot of advice, even though he's getting on in years, but he just loves it. And if he stands and watches Simon, he can tell him where he's going wrong, and the lines, even at his age, he's still able to pass on that kind of advice. He's fantastic at doing that, and such a great help for me when I started. He was able to take me around all the road races, and he knew for sure if he told you one thing about a certain corner that he knew it was spot on.
Fantastic. So one more question for you guys, just before I leave you to go through the rest of the pictures. Gail Core says, boys, what were your favourite national Irish road races when you were racing? So we could start with Con, that'd be fantastic.
Well, for me, as I say, I love the TT. National Irish Road Race, international as well. I figured the TT, perfect. The Ulster Grand Prix was a mini TT, and Tandragee was a mini Dundrod. It's one of the old 4 or 5 mile road circuits, different sections, up, down, elevations. I loved it. I also love Skerries, small 3 mile circuit. They're just north of Dublin. But for the feeling the rider gets, for the enjoyment, the feedback, that was a big buzz. I enjoyed that too. When we were racing, Brian as well, now there are road circuits, or road racers and circuit racers. Then it was motorbike racing, and you did whatever came next week. You couldn't miss it. You would do your Mandellos, your Kirkstowns, wherever, and enjoy it.
And
but
yourself,
the road
Brian?
circuits, the national,
Sorry,
the national circuits.
I sort of agree with everything Con said. It's sort of the Tandragee for our national circuit is one of the best that I always loved it, and it was one of my local circuits as well. I have to say, the Temple 100, I loved the Temple 100. A lot of success around there. Either loved it or hated it. And it sort of clicked for me, and you had a lot of jumping and a lot of wheeling, and it was just great fun. And Dundrod, as Con has already said, it's like a mini TT. And when you came back from the TT in June, the first race was the Calinchi, which was at Dundrod. So it was great to come back from the TT, and you'd already done 2 weeks of hard riding, and the Ulster Grand Prix circuit for the Calinchi was just great circuit to come back to. It's just very similar, very fast and flowing, and one of my favourites as well.
Hailey, you mentioned their national road circuits. Back in our day, it was the Tandragee was the first circuit, the first road. Cookstown. Tandragee, a good long national road race. Cookstown, the old Sherrygrim circuit was longer, 5+. The Northwest, you went on. The Calinchi, the TT came along, then the Calinchi, then Skerries, Temple, Mid-Antrim, Carador. There was a great number of national road circuits, real good road circuits at that time, and a good field of riders. You had your Raymond McCulloughs, your Ian McGregors, your Joey Dunlops, Courtney Junks talking about Jackie Hughes, Trevor Steele, Brian, Graham Young, Stephen Cull, a great range of competitors, good hard racing, and racing was good at that time. That has changed now. The circuits are different. The circuits are left or shorter, and maybe not as good. Maybe not as many spectators. Maybe not as big a buzz. I hope I'm not casting any doubt on the competitors today, because you couldn't. The skill and the speed they're doing it, I don't know how they do it. But racing back then was good too, and with all the good national road circuits you mentioned. Wow, that's the cat on the tail, isn't it?
Yes. Very good. I don't know when we'll get a chance to do that again, Con, but hopefully we will.
I remember that evening. Great crack.
Yeah.
Barry looks like he's got a few Ocals on board.
That is
Bushies.
Manx passing blazing, by the way.
Were they?
They were designed by Roy Moore.
Were you able to get Con to have a beer at all? He's a big cook man.
Well, you know, Brian, at the time I did the Temple 100 and we had to go round on the newcomers bus, you were at the front telling the story, but I couldn't get back and I couldn't hear a word. And I was laughing well on the windows. So when we got back to the start, I said, well, thanks very much for that. But what was all that about? That was your chance to go. It was too close after the sub 100 for us, and you were probably saving for the Manx as well, so you couldn't afford to do everyone. But like Tom said, like you both said, a cracking road race, hard to learn.
It was hard. It was hard to learn, yeah, because of the bumps and the jumps, and you just needed to be on the correct part of the road all the time, or else you were in dead trouble. And unfortunately, that was where my career ended in '94. But you know, it was one of those things, just an accident, and you know, it was one of my favorites. Just loved the bumps and jumps. Whenever we went to the TT, people used to say about the bumps, how bumpy it was, and we thought it was like the M1. So
that's
parts
right.
of the TTs, you know, after riding around the like it's scaries.
A couple of years I went down. I was injured watching at the quarter bridge for the first practice, and all the Englishmen had the bikes totally out of shape. The Irish boys had the bikes set up well because they were used to rough road races, and they had the bikes set up a lot. By Tuesday or Wednesday, things were balanced out a bit, but it was always very noticeable for the first practice session. I was going to ask you a question, if I may. I know, Brian, you've ridden all sorts of bikes, 2-stroke and 4-stroke, but Con, did you ever race a 4-stroke at all?
No, I never did.
I didn't think so.
No, there wasn't. It wasn't. I started in 1973 and finished in 1983. I had a couple of runs in '85, but I wasn't fit to do it correct. I wasn't fit to do it well. Now, if you take the years and the timeline, 1986 brought out the VFR Hondas, GSXR Suzuki's, FZR 750 Yamahas. The street bike class came along, and then the RC 30s, and it went all towards the 4-stroke. And it wasn't until later on, when doing my traveller marshal job, I realised what I had missed. How good these big bikes were in straight stock road bike condition.
Yeah.
An FZR 1000 Yamaha, an X-Up, great bike. Old now, but later on, all through my years in the traveller marshal job with the Fireblade, SP1, SP2, you realise just how good the 4-strokes are. I enjoy my bikes. I'll tell you, one of the best bikes I ever rode, didn't race it, was a friend of mine, Jim Lilly. Jim's passed now, but he had an RS 500 Honda, 3-cylinder 500 Honda. And I got the beauty of that, different circuits, just in parade lap use. But such a beautiful motorbike. Big RC30 fan too, to be honest.
Regal Championship started in '89 here, and that was 600 4-strokes, and that was the beginning of the end, really, I suppose, for the 2-strokes. You know, and I raced in that Regal and won it the first 2 years. And you know, people sort of think of me more of a 2-stroke rider, but you know, I did win 2 4-stroke races at the TT, the Supersport 600 and the Supersport 400. So I did enjoy riding those as well, but my heart sort of lies with the 2-strokes.
I was going to say, you both came up with the 2-stroke era, and it's the essence of it, really. Yeah,
250 was my favourite, and 350 and the 350 days. It's a pity that for me that the 350s were done away with, because they were fantastic bikes, and then obviously the Formula 2 bike for me, that the 350 Yamaha as well, fantastic going thing. And you know, it was you know, the 350 was a great class. I think Colin would agree that the 350s were a great bike.
Great bike and great racing.
That Formula 2 bike was 350, but based on the LC engine, which was, had more low-down power than a TZ, which sort of surprised me when I first started riding it, because it felt really flat when I first started to ride it. But when I saw the lap times, I just couldn't believe it. It didn't have any. It didn't have any. Surge of power. It just come in really smooth, which made it feel like it wasn't going as well as a TZ. But they were fantastic bikes too.
The Formula 2, Brian, I think you'll agree, you felt as if you were short-changing it. You were changing gear. You hadn't the revs of a 350. Just kept changing gears and it kept pulling.
That's right. I remember when we first got the bike, middle of practice for TT, and so we didn't have a lot of practice on it at all. And the first time, even when I started it up, it just felt terrible, felt flat as a flute. And when I rode around that first night in practice, I just thought this isn't going at all. But then when I looked at the lap times, I got a real surprise. And my Formula 2 bike on speed trap at the TT at 156 mile an hour in 1985, which was some speed for those days.
But of course, you went from the TZs into Con the Wadden, Brian, the EMC.
Yeah.
I assume that those bikes, the road taxis, were a quicker bike then, because everybody seemed to go all of a sudden to the road taxis and Cottons and things.
Yeah, well, Con was he rode the Rotax engine bikes before me. Then I was always, Yamaha. I was really reluctant to change to the Rotax, but I met Joe Ehrlich at the motorbike show and had a chat with him. And Joe always talked very big, and it was this lap speed he was claiming that was going to be done, and I sort of thought, he's talking nonsense, but he was 100% correct. And when I did make the move to the Rotax, it did make a big difference. I really enjoyed riding them, and the Spawn frame was really great frame, and that's what I designed my Formula 2 bike to be as close to the EMC frame as I could possibly make it, and that was a great success as well. It really worked well. So Rotax, they weren't that reliable at the beginning, especially the gearboxes gave trouble, but as the years went on, they got better, and they were a great TT bag.
Yeah.
We've got a great question here, boys, from David Patterson asking, what and why is your favourite bike at the TT? So we could start with Brian and continuing on from that.
The RG was a great bike. Suzuki, but I preferred the smaller bikes. So probably the AMC, although I never won a race on the AMC. Nearly did a 6-lap TT junior race, and I led most of the way and had 11-second lead and ran out of pedal with Hilbury on the last lap, which nearly broke my heart because that would have been my first TT win. But the Rotax was a lovely thing to ride around there.
And yourself, Con?
Well, I had the early Rotaxes. David's father, Jackie, introduced me to Rotaxes first of all. That was the Wadden. Later on to become the Wadden Ehrlich. And I found they had something. They were very smooth, great acceleration, disc valve, and great potential, I thought. One fault they did have, the early ones were, the very first Rotax that came, Derek Huxley rode it, was a V-twin formation, which Yamaha and Honda both went to in later years. But for the production bike, they did a tandem twin. And what in effect it was, Hailey, was a 125 crankcase, 125 crankshaft, disc valve, transmission and clutch, with an additional cylinder forward of that. They made a common crankcase to take 2 of those cylinders, but all that power was transmitted through the 125. The water pump had some trouble there. The transmission shafts, the clutch itself was all doing the work, but it was a 125 design. Basically, the last of the road taxes and the first of the road taxes were very much similar, but a lot of the faults ironed out. So the early ones had to find these faults, and that's where a lot of the retirements came from. Us at home here, a rider in England riding a road tax bike would race at Mullery Park or Brands Hatch, which could be an 8-lap race, an 8-mile distance. Whereas us at Tandragee, 8-lap race, 5.5 miles distance. You're doing longer miles, and I'll be honest, maybe breaking more stuff, bits and pieces, but those bits get fixed. And finding the fix. Now, I got off to a sidetrack. You asked me what was the best bike. Yes, the EMC, it has to be because of the success. But the nicest bike I had, the most one I enjoyed for my recent years was the RG 500 Suzuki. Brian and me both had new Mark 8s in 1983, and I did enjoy it. When it came to 85, 86, I talked about later, when the 4-strokes came along, you could still ride your RG, but the 4-strokes were allowed to run 1000 cc's, your RG's 500 cc. So they overlapped, and it became pointless to ride an RG. It was too expensive, maintenance-wise and performance-wise. The big XR69s and the big competitive 4-strokes were just too much performance. But to ride that bike, I had a good run on that in the 83 Senior. I enjoyed it very much.
Fantastic. Okay, boys, we just got a few more questions before we have to say goodbye to you. So we'll just share a few more from the viewers. We've got Kevin Miller commenting, saying the onboard lap of Brian's on the 250 on YouTube is still one of the best ever. John Kashirski says he could listen to this all day if only he was sat in a pub sat across from these superheroes. I agree, John. I'm right there with you. Chris Moffat said he's been commenting and loving it as well. Ted Fagan says, hi, Con, did you enjoy racing in the 4 Village in Westmeath?
Oh, I loved it. I was down there recently twice. We went to the Kells Road race, and afterwards spent the evening, a great evening's crack in 4 Village, took some photographs, and then we went to the Walderstown race. There was an accident in the morning and the race was cancelled, but we ended up in 4 Village again, an even better night's crack. Oh, I love every bit of it. I like the circuit as well.
Sounds like a whole other show. Great. And Brian Spooner says, what a privilege to listen to these great men. Pete Forsyth, I can't speak. Absolutely loving this. I grew up following Brian, good friend of my late dad. And David Patterson says, Cons Waden is now owned by David Crawford and still immaculate. Fantastic. Right, boys. So listen, it's an absolute pleasure to have you join Roy and Barry and myself in the studio. Really, really appreciate your time. Wonderful to listen to you and grateful for you sharing your stories with our viewers and our followers. So thank you so much. Have you had fun?
Sorry, I'm
missing the TT. We're missing the TT.
I know, right?
Back in 21, we haven't missed it since 1975, I think. So really missing it. The Isle of Man. I love the Isle of Man.
I love it. Just going to say one thing that did happen to me, and I think to most people, made a lot of friends in Ireland. Still keep in touch. Stan Bassnett, Carl, Randall's gone, Lee, just so many good friends. Going back there, Chris, Union Mills, just going back there, you meet so many people, and every day you meet somebody else, and it's just part of the fun as well as the racing. So it is. So just like to say hello to those people.
Brilliant. And Brian, we look forward to seeing you back as well in 2021.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
TT, Manx Grand Prix, Southern 100.
Crossing everything. Garn and Brian, thank you so much. We'll say a goodbye to you. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next year at the TT.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
All.
Take care.
Cheers. Hope to see you then.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cheer up the cat.
Yeah. Barry and Roy, what a show.
Yeah, as I say,
Very enjoyable.
yeah, I was just going to be
Both good talkers as well. Once you get them started, they're good to talk, and a lot of what they say, I can understand all that. I raced all them circuits myself many years. I know lots of the characters that they're talking about. But that's why I hang around with lots of Irish people in pubs. It's what I do. That's what I'm familiar with. So I'm glad it came together, Hailey, anyway. Yeah. I'm glad that happened. You know, that's my comfort zone sort of thing. So great stuff. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Roy, great stories, hey?
Yeah, you can't beat it, can you? And it's all memories. But then again, if you've got a memory and you listen to the lads there, they're two of many who have got memories to share, and fabulous to listen to.
But I think what it also illustrates, which I try to say to lots of people, is that road races are real people. If you think of all what they've achieved, there was no bullshit there. There was no egos. There was no name on your shirt kind of a thing. They are just real people, and they would be like that if you walked in the pub or if you were sat on a hedge watching and you got talking to them. Real people. And in lots of other sports where there's big egos involved, it's a refreshing change, I think.
Absolutely. It's an absolute honour. We've got some fantastic comments saying, Chris Moffat says, fantastic crack. Linny Ritzy says, awesome show. Roger Barnes, thanks all. Brian Spooner, fantastic. Noreen Lawrence, excellent. And Phil Looney, where's your Dramara Destroyer t-shirt, Barry? I
couldn't get over my head, let alone over my belly. So
brilliant. Boys, thanks again. It was an absolute honour having you, and I love bringing you on the show, and you guys inviting your guests now and entertaining your Mountain Memories followers as well. Thank you so much. It's a privilege.
Very enjoyable.
Take care, boys.
See you later.
Cheers.
Ta-da.
Thank you. Well, thank you once again to every single one of you. Thank you for all of your comments and your questions. We've loved the show. I know you have too. So please do share it with your friends. Make sure if you're not watching on YouTube, you head over there and subscribe, because that's what helps us grow our content and continue to grow this community. So thank you once again. I'm Hailey Coxon. This is Revved Up and Relived with the great Roy Moore and Barry Wood on the Spirit of Motorsport TV.
Bing, 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 bing. Here we go. Ooh.